Okay, I can see we've still got people joining us, but I think in the meantime, we should probably kick off. VJ, you'll manage and help everybody join from the back end, I'm sure. Thank you so much. So it's now 12:01, so I think we should get started. A warm and happy welcome to everyone. My name is Wendy Spalding, and I'm the MD of Tuesday Consulting. I would like to formally welcome our international and local panelists, our registered guests, who I notice represent a wide range of industries, and last but certainly not least, the Tuesday Consulting team, who today are dialing in from Gauteng, the Western Cape, and the Eastern Cape. It's important to acknowledge that it was World Mental Health Day this last Sunday, the 10th of October. We were showing some slides as you joined from the South African Medical and Education Foundation. Unfortunately, they show some shocking statistics. I was personally taken aback to know that on average, 23 South Africans commit suicide every day, and that mental health illnesses such as depression cost the world 13 trillion rand in loss of productivity. These statistics made us realize how important a webinar discussion like this is. I'll quickly run through some housekeeping. Because there are so many of us online, the registered guests are muted and they don't have video, but we do encourage you to use the chat box and put up your virtual hands by using the emoji during the Q&A session. This session is being recorded and we will post it to our website so that it can be viewed at any time. Hopefully, you will also have your mobile phones close by and charged so that you can participate in a Mentimeter poll. Tuesday Consulting recently ran a couple of polls to gain some data-related insights into mental health in the organizational context. I think Nicole's going to share a slide with us now. Nicole, do you have that slide? On our LinkedIn poll. There we go. So thank you so much. So we posted two polls on LinkedIn. We were really keen to get some data-related insights on what is actually happening and not make any assumptions. Here we've got some statistics. We asked openly respondents to comment on whether mental health is an openly discussed topic in the organization. It does appear that it's quite average. So we had 47% of the respondents said yes, it is an openly discussed topic, but 53% said no. And that 53% is a very concerning number in terms of this particular poll. I think before I hand over to Shirley, I'd like to invite you all to participate via Mentimeter. I don't know if you've used it before, but it's quite a fun application for a webinar like this to help us conduct some further research. Nicole has a slide that she's going to show you. I encourage you to log in preferably via your device, your cell phone, to mentimeter.com and use the code 4198-6988. 4198-6988. What we're asking is if, in your opinion, what the most significant challenge, if any, to mental health awareness is in organizations. We've given you a few multiple choice options there. The stigma attached to seeking help, a lack of understanding of mental problems, uncertainty of how to get help, fear of disclosing mental health problems, and you may also feel that there is no challenge. So please take your phones, log on to menti.com and use the code 4198-6988. I'll give everybody just a few seconds just so that they can respond to that. We also do have quite a lot of people still logging in. So it's interesting at the moment that a lack of understanding of mental problems seems to be everybody's opinion in terms of we stand at 46% of the attendees commenting on that, with fear of disclosing mental health problems as the next highest percentage. For those that have just joined us, we're just voting on menti.com and looking at what the most significant challenge, if any, to mental health awareness is in organizations. I know that we're on a tight timeline, so I apologize for those who haven't had a chance to complete this. But what we can see across our attendees is that most of them feel that a lack of understanding of mental problems is the biggest challenge to awareness of mental health in organizations. Hopefully, these results will give our panel something to consider when responding. I'm now going to hand over to Shirley, who will facilitate today's webinar. I know that most of you will be familiar with Shirley's corporate career in HR and may have even read her book, Swimming Upstream. Shirley is currently an active and influential board member in corporate South Africa, and she takes her leadership role very seriously. We value her as a critical member of our Tuesday consulting team. Thank you, Shirley, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and thank you to all the participants and delegates and attendees today. I think this is such an important discussion, and it comes right off the back of World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October. And it's such an important topic for us to be seriously thinking about as we navigate through what the pandemic has brought to us. And the topic of mental wellness has become top of minds for many CEOs. And I can tell you, on the boards that I serve, this is a critical, crucial topic at the moment. And so today, I have a lovely panel of esteemed and well steeped in their expertise. I'm going to really enjoy this conversation with them, and we have a global case study, set of case studies that will look at the role of leadership in mental health and what we can learn from our colleagues from right across the world. I think there's such a very exciting moment here for us, and I think that there will be much to learn. So without much ado, I'm going to introduce the colleagues, and then I will ask them to make a few opening statements for about 5 minutes or so, and then I will ask a question, and we will then into a Q&A session. So I'd like you to tee up your question that you came today that's perhaps sitting on your heart, something you would like to know more about. But please make use of the opportunity to engage in dialogue with the panelists. So the first panelist I'd like to introduce is Karen Carl. Karen is the founder and managing director of Life Online, an Australian-based advisory which brings deep expertise, data analytics, and artificial intelligence together into the well-being space and crafts customized insight-driven solutions for clients. She has an interest in the intersection of well-being, people, and technology, and understanding the interface between human behavior and digital organization. And we look forward to hearing from Karen. And Karen, I'm just going to introduce everybody, and then I'm going to come back to you to make your opening statements. A warm welcome to Karen. This is the time we should have been applauding, but we'll try and do that remotely and virtually. Melisha Awuno is with us today as our second panelist. Melisha is a seasoned human resource professional with diverse global experience across multiple commodities. She's currently the HR Director of EOH. She has previously held leadership roles at the Barlow Group Company, as well as Coal of Africa, Score Metals, and Anglo American. We welcome you here today, Melisha, and look forward to your inputs. Next up, we have Terence Taylor, who is an experienced talent and organizational development executive currently working for Google in the US. He has an extensive global human resource expertise. When he lived in South Africa, he worked for corporates such as Standard Bank and the Discovery Group. And Terence has completed his MBA at the Harvard Business School. A warm welcome to you, Terence, all the way. And then we have our fourth panelist, Letabu Sekele. Letabu is a businesswoman and an experienced non-executive director who has served on a few boards. She is the founder of Work Well Workplace Mental Health Program, which is committed to fighting mental health stigma in the workplace. And as you can see, each of our panelists brings a very distinguished set of credentials to us, global experience, and a really great opportunity to learn a lot more in this particular challenge of mental wellness and where we are now, some tips and tools and some takeouts we can go and use when we go back. So I'm going to invite each of our panelists now to just make some opening statements. We're going to try, panelists, to keep each one of you at 5 minutes on this. And then we will have, I will ask the first question and we'll open up to the floor for Q&A. So, Karen Cole, please, a warm welcome to you, and we look forward to what you have to share with us today.
Thank you so much, Shirley, and thank you to Tuesday Consulting. So really pleased to be part of this panel, and I will keep this as brief as possible. But essentially, as we've already seen with some of the statistics you've shown and some of the responses coming through, we have a well-being crisis, and I think it is evident. Some of the statistics coming through, we see that the pandemic itself has really lowered emotional well-being by 74%. And essentially, organizations, from our perspective, found themselves quite unprepared to suddenly deal with the amount of support they were required to provide at an individual level in terms of well-being. It's not all bad, because it really has started shifting our conversation and started making us consider where that duty of care really resides, how much of that duty of care resides with the organization versus with the individual themselves. I think one of the other key aspects that it's highlighted is that we really need to start broadening our definition of well-being and move it out of the illness space or the mental health space specifically into a much broader space that also looks at impacts of things like loneliness on us as well. Just because I haven't been diagnosed with depression doesn't mean that I'm not struggling. What is facilitating those conversations? How are we bringing that to the fore? How are we dealing with everyday challenges like anxiety, like low mood, like those impacts that really do hamper our performance, but we don't necessarily require medical diagnosis or treatment for that? I think those are very real conversations we need to start having. Can we broaden this definition? And can we, most importantly, start removing the stigma around that? And I think, essentially the pandemic has really triggered this value shift within individuals to be a little bit more authentic, to bring themselves into work. As leaders, we need to meet that head on. We need to remove that stigma. We need to also be vulnerable, and we need to encourage more conversations and be more accepting of that fact, more accepting of our humanness. Thank you, Shirley. That's from my side. That was really quick.
Thank you so much, Karen. That is very, very profound and very, very sharp. And we want to come back to some of the points that you have made, because you made some very, very critical points in those opening comments. Okay, Melisha, I'm going to ask you to just do a little opening set of comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shirley, and thank you everybody for joining today. It's been a year since, day 570 that we've been in lockdown. And while 2020 was unprecedented, unprecedented. I think 2021 just came onto a completely different level. And I think for January 1st, psychologically, a lot of people had thought that when January 1 comes, it'll be a new year, we'll be refreshed. We spent last year trying to put in place tools for our people, like office furniture, away from keyboard, the standard practices that were being implemented across industries. I think in February, I then wrote an article on burnout because it was February and people were feeling burnt out. And I think what had happened was when the wave hit us in December, COVID was no longer an issue around numbers, but it was a personal impact on us in terms of people being the deaths that were taking place. Further compounding that was the challenging socioeconomic circumstances we found ourselves in as a country. And I got to thinking, are we dealing with burnout or is this post-traumatic stress? But no matter what you label it, it's about mental health issues. Unfortunately, whether you look at it from a cultural perspective or within organizations, there's a lot of stigma and structural exclusion as it relates to mental health issues. Traditionally, it's seen as a woman issue. Traditionally, it's seen as something when you cry, but it's such an in-depth topic that requires such a lot of analysis and education in relation to it's okay to not be okay. I think as someone who's responsible in the HR function within our business, we take the well-being of our people very seriously. And we've tried to extend support. And you can't apply a cookie cutter approach to this, right? Because each individual responds to it so fundamentally differently. And one of the things that stood out for me was that we also assumed that working from home, that people were in a safe space, and it wasn't the case in relation to things like gender-based violence, but also for a lot of our young people that were living alone. So we put in place things like Wellness Wednesdays, which we've continued. So twice a month, we get specialists to come and chat to our people. We've touched over 9,000 of our people through these sessions. It's a voluntary process. We've arranged for medical assessments to take place at home. We've also tried to put in place playbooks. So playbook on working from home, a playbook on dealing with burnout. And trying to actually put that playbook together myself, I got to a point where I thought, oh, you can't pour from an empty cup yourself. So you actually have to focus on self-care as a leader. What we've done in EOH is also implemented duvet days. So every employee has 5 duvet days where they can take time off to reset if they've needed. And I have to admit, as an HR leader, it doesn't feel like it's enough. We need to take time to reset and refocus, be mindful of our own self-care rituals, and also allow people to understand that they need to do what works for them. Once again, a cookie cutter approach doesn't work. Forcing the issue doesn't work. It's such a highly personal journey, and all we can do is put in place the relevant support that is required. I think the respecting of boundaries is also a big issue. And I think working mothers, and I'm a working mother myself, especially when it came to having to homeschool and work from home, the challenges were fundamentally different. So you need to make sure that whatever we put in place, we create a safe enough space. I do believe that being vulnerable is a very credible and authentic demonstration of our humanity. And I don't believe our humanity has ever been challenged as much as it has right now. I think it's critically important for leaders to be able to share this part of themselves, to be prepared to show our vulnerability more easily. It allows us to gain our trust of our people, and more importantly, allows us to be much more effective leaders. I think my focus has always been to try to create a safe space and also to share with people that it's okay to not be okay. We are in this together. And I think creating a safe enough space allows us for people themselves to come forward and say, I need help, I'm not coping. But Shirley, we're very far from where we need to be. Mental health has always been an issue. I think COVID just exacerbated the challenges we have as people. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you so much, Melisha, for raising some absolutely crucial elements there. and we want to cycle back to that in some of the Q&A. So we'll hold on to those gems, and welcome Terence Taylor to just make a few observations from where he's at. He's currently working in Google in the US. So welcome to you, Terence.
Thank you, Shirley. It's such a privilege and a pleasure to be with you all. It's a bit early in the morning for me here, but I'm very excited to be a part of this conversation. I would love to share with you what my experience at Google has been when it comes to the organization and our leadership leaning into organizational wellness and mental health for Googlers. And there are three lessons that I would like to share, and then I'll double click on each of them. The first one is, as leaders, we have to be clear about where we stand as an organization when it comes to organizational well-being and the mental health of our people. Second, we have to be caring. And third, we have to be flexible. So let me start with be clear. The first thing I noticed is as the pandemic began, our leadership made it very clear to us that our OKR-driven culture would remain, but the key thing was the objectives were going to stay the same, but the key results would need to change. Why? Because with the pandemic being unprecedented, it was not going to be business as usual. But the objectives speak very much to our core goals as an organization, and there will be an opportunity for people to adjust as they needed to. Be caring. The message came through very loud and clear very early on that we should put on our own oxygen masks first. And we spent quite a bit of time reaching out to our managers, especially via a virtual stream of a virtual series, I should say, that we called a live stream on managing during the coronavirus pandemic. And we provided information about topics very broadly, but one of the key things we dialed into was mental health and resilience. And we provided them with resources as well as making sure that they shared as a community what was working for them and what was working for their teams. And then we made all of that available via a website, so or web page, internal web page, so that they would have access to resources. In addition, we made sure that anyone who wanted to have a session with a psychologist was able to do so. And we did that as a benefit that folks could tap into at any time. And then third, we made sure that we extended something called carers leave. So if you at any stage felt that you weren't coping, you didn't need to really explain. You could take leave, and that leave could be up to 14 weeks. And I would like to share with you that I ended up taking carers leave. Towards the end of 2020, my cousin Miata was going through a very difficult experience where her only son, my nephew Siddiqui, was dying from cancer. And after trying to be resilient throughout the pandemic, I realized that I needed to tap out. So I took carers leave for 10 weeks and I went out to Santa Monica to spend time with her and Siddiqui. And I'm very proud to say I was able to be there with her and him at a very crucial time. Unfortunately, we did lose him, but Google showed a lot of care by allowing me to be able to take that leave. And then finally, be flexible. It's been clear to us that we want to return to office, but we want to return to office safely. And we want to do so in a way that honors all the sacrifices that people are making. So part of that flexibility has been to change the stance that we have globally in terms of when it's safe for people to return back to office. And as part of that flexibility as well, we've set what we call global reset days, where people are allowed to have a holiday each quarter throughout the company globally. And then each team, including the team that I'm on, People Development, has chosen certain things like Heads Down Friday or Wellness Fridays, as we call them, where on those days you're allowed to not have any meetings if that's what you choose to do, or just to have a different way of focusing on yourself and your work. So thank you very much, Shirley and Wendy. I appreciate this opportunity to share these experiences with you all.
Terence, thank you so much also for sharing a personal a part of your journey with us in this. And I think that's really what it's all about as well. It comes down to, and as Karen was also saying, it becomes personal, and we need to understand, what that actually means for us. And I think each one of you have touched on various elements of that. I'm now going to ask panelist Letabo, who has founded a workplace mental health program. She's actually founded this herself. And I just wanted to hear some of her observations in the fight against the mental health stigma in the workplace, and any other thoughts, Letabo, that you might want to bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shirley, and thank you to the Tuesday team for inviting me to this platform. Just from my experience, I would say firstly, as everybody has said correctly so, that the pandemic has really sort of created what I would say is a perfect storm in terms of highlighting mental health issues in the workplace. But already we had, the statistics on depression in South Africa were pretty high even before the pandemic. And I guess the other thing that organizations currently are also thinking about is post-pandemic, how it is that they're going to be handling and dealing with, the mental health of their employees. One thing I want to highlight as well is that we currently, as South African, I would say the continent as a whole, there isn't much research that has been done in terms of employee mental health. And research is very critical because it's what is going to assist us to understand what works and what doesn't. So currently, a lot of organizations are trying quite a few strategies here and there. But as it stands, I think the biggest question in a lot of minds of the leaders in organizations is what works? Are we doing the right thing? So I think that's point number one, to really have an understanding of what is it that can be done, what works and what doesn't. And I think there are quite a few lessons we can learn from, international organizations like Google that have done quite well in the mental health space. The other issue is, do organizations have the right people in place to adequately address employee mental health? We are talking about it, it's out there, it's on social media. Companies are also taking the initiative to sort of start the conversation, but internally, do we have the right people in place? I know it's predominantly actually in a lot of companies handled by HR. Is HR qualified enough to deal with employee mental health adequately? So I would say those are the issues, having the right teams in place, and also the right strategies. And what are those? So I think from my perspective and observation, that's what it is. And another thing is stigma. I think that is the big thing that is holding a lot of people back, organizations back, in terms of adequately and openly and honestly dealing with mental health in the workplace. Stigma is a big thing. And for me, I think that is the one thing that needs to be tackled, and everything else would sort of follow. I would say from my end, those are the issues at hand when it comes to this very important topic. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you so much, Letabo, for raising some of these key issues and confirming some of the elements, especially around stigma and our strategy and around research. And the question of HR qualified enough to deal with this would be something I'm sure that I can see Melisha might want to respond. It would be very interesting to hear what your response was to that. So thanks for those opening comments. And I think, really one question, from my side really is around, we understand that, this pandemic and the socioeconomic challenges that we face in the world, and particularly in South Africa as well, has been affecting our people for a very, very long time. And mental wellness has always been, as many of you said, not, firmly on the table. I think it now finally is, and we have a great opportunity here as we work our way through the vaccination process and into a new world of work, which might be hybrid or any other configuration that is currently, being planned. How should employers reorganize work to prevent stress and anxiety as much as possible, remedy the problems that are at the root cause of stress and anxiety and burnout in the workplace? What sorts of things can our leaders actually be doing? And yeah, you've given some fantastic examples here, which I think we can all go and should go and try if we haven't started to do something specific as yet. But where we are at right now, I also like the thought about humanization of our leaders and our cultures and our organization, and also the element of self-care. How are we taking better care of ourselves? So to do a little bit of a deep dive into that. But the question really is, the critical role of leadership. We're talking about, in our organizations, are they telling their stories? Are they making themselves vulnerable? Can they role model what healthy living means, and what, and how mental wellness is a strategic priority to them, in order not just for the people to be productive, but for them to really care. And I know, we talked about care many years ago in organizations, and I know you raised, the point of duty of care and diligence. That is so critical, especially now. So, and sometimes when you talk about these things, it feels soft and fluffy. People roll their eyes back and say, we're running a business. But I think now we really have an opportunity in our organizations to do something quite remarkable for our people. So I know I'm asking a lot of questions within the question, but the big thing is, what is the role of leadership right now to ensure that we are able to move our people and transition them into perhaps what would be another phase of this journey, and to ensure that whatever the definition of wellness you take is firmly being supported, is part of the strategy, and people are experiencing that within our organizations. And it's an open question to any of the panelists, and then we'll take some questions from the floor. Any of you?
I don't mind stepping in just to add my views to that. So I think two things, and through some of the research that we've been undertaking, one of the critical things that we're needing to do is, this is almost the scale at which we're experiencing this it's quite unprecedented in an area that we traditionally don't do that well. So I think leaders are quite stuck in terms of which way to go forward. And there's not a lack of initiatives trying to be put into organizations. I think what's happening is there's such an unknown of what is actually going to work and what's not. So we're not trying, and we want to really solve the problem. We're just not really sure. And I think it comes back to, how are we diagnosing these issues? How are we gaining that deep insight at that individual level, so that we can put the right things in place that are going to, again, move us away from that cookie cutter approach that was spoken of earlier, getting in touch with what each individual needs from a wellness perspective, and not necessarily giving it to them, but allowing people to access what they need. I think one of the challenges when it comes to especially mental health is, we always say, if you need something, reach out. But we're especially talking to a group of people that are just not capable of reaching out, which means we are the ones that need to really make sure that everything we need, or everything they could need, is really there for them to easily access at that point. And it doesn't necessarily involve us being part of that conversation or that journey. And I think that's the role of leaders, is to analyze enough to understand where our teams, where our people are at, and then put that almost buffet of options that they can draw from, that are destigmatized, to help themselves through that process. So that is my view.
Thank you so much, Karen. Are there any other responses to that from some of the other panelists?
Hi, Shirley. I would love to chime in here.
Terence, please go ahead.
I think leaders could lean into building or strengthening community among their team members and the rest of the organization. But let's start at the unit of teams. It would be really good to spend time making sure that people are okay and worrying less about the work, because once you build that strong community and people feel okay, productivity tends to increase. So if I use an example that I was part of here at Google, we ended up putting together social connects with our team, within our team, and we spent just 15 minutes. And we started off initially at the start of the pandemic with 2 connects a week. And then as we felt better and more connected, we took it down to 1 a week. And it was only 15 minutes, and you were only allowed to talk about how you're doing. And we spent a lot of time getting to know each other so well that the bonds that we've built as a result of that have just made work that much easier going forward. So I would highly recommend that leaders lean into building community among their teams.
Thank you very much, Terence. That spirit of community, I think, is a very important point. And maybe we can dig deep into that also to understand how does one actually do that. But I'm going to just ask any of the others panelists here if you've got further comments on the role of leadership in organizational wellness, just very quickly before we go to our participants.
If I may, please, Shirley.
Yes, of
I'd
course.
like to address the leadership and whether HR is qualified question.
Yes.
I think without leadership support, very little can take traction in any business. And while your buffet of offering is based on trying to make sure you have the widest span of offerings for individuals to come to, without leadership support, it doesn't tend to take traction. And I think talking about it is one thing, but putting your name behind, whether it be through a policy, whether it be through duvet days. And an example, duvet days did not come out of HR. It was our group exco that actually proposed it. So having that high touch understanding, I think, is very important. Whether HR is qualified, I think if you have a look at the details around mental health and the challenges, no, we're not. However, we have a responsibility to keep our fingers at the pulse of the organization, number one. Number two, to create those safe spaces for our people, and then bring in experts to support us. We can't diagnose the true extent of mental health challenges that people have. However, if we are in touch with our people, we'll get a better understanding of what their challenges are. So through like the Wellness Wednesdays as an example, it's a broad range of topics from managing your personal relationships right up to financial fitness. So it's a voluntary process. And those sessions are then followed up with, if you need more information, this is where you'll find it. But to Karen's point, it is incredibly vast. It's a minefield. And there are specialists out there that can support us to be able to deliver what is needed in some small way to our people. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you so much, Melisha. That was a great response also to the role of HR and how we can create safe spaces for people to access the kind of support that they need, and bring in experts. I think is the other point that you made. Where we don't have the capacity or competence to deal with the complexities. Let me just see. Litaba, did you want to say something before we moved on?
Yes, I did, Shirley. I think the important thing also is if organizations, or rather leaders, are going to genuinely address employee mental health, it's going to be very important to see it as, to view it, not just, I think someone said, fluff, or just a nice to have, but really incorporating mental health as a critical part of doing business, and understanding that the wellness of your people is of utmost importance. And I think to genuinely deal with mental health is taking a very systemic and I would say robust approach to understanding where your staff is on a mental health level. I'm using tools like surveys, for instance, to give you an idea of where your people are, and also measuring the impact of the interventions. If we are not able, if we're investing so much as leaders in the well-being of our people, but not going back to really measure the impact or evaluate the impact and the improvement as a result of our interventions, then it's really a futile exercise. So that's why I'm saying we need a very systemic and robust approach to employee mental health, and really understanding what it is that works and what doesn't work. And we're only going to be able to do that once we start engaging as leaders with our employees. Another thing I wanted to highlight is, most of you are familiar with Section 8 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which in fact places an obligation on employers to, as far as reasonably and practically possible, minimize, risk to the physical health of employees. But also, it's not just minimizing, risk to the physical health, also the mental health. So already, I think organizations, if they begin to view that as a responsibility and an obligation legally to take care of the mental health of the staff, of their employees rather, I think that gives us an opportunity to take it more seriously, understanding the legal obligation that we have, and also putting measures in place to understand what are those risks, those psychosocial or psychological risks in the workplace that are causing harm to the mental well-being of our people. That's just, my comment on that.
Thank you very much. I think you've raised a very important point, Letabo, especially on, the legal obligations that we have in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And I think if I looked even at the sustainability goal number 3, it says ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages, and specific targets that relate to mental health. And then there are subsets of that within those sustainability goals. So I think that we all have an obligation to make sure that that happens. And to your point, where organizations have been on the, in leading from the front on this, the smarter organizations, and they've been able to engage your employees more effectively right from the get-go. They're probably leading the way. So and will be more sustainable as they move forward. I now would like to open up to the floor to see if there are any specific questions. You can put the questions into the chat box, or you can even put up your hand and flick on your computer, your camera, and make your questions as short and as sharp as possible, so that we can get the input from the panelists, which is really what we want to achieve here today. I see Bongani Malotra. Nice to see you, Bongani. Please tell us your question or comment. You there, Bongani?
I think VJ just needs, yeah, you did. I think VJ just needs to unmute and allow Bongani to talk.
When you
We
are
could
still waiting on that, you can, do you want to go through the comments?
Yeah. Can you see the chat box, Shirley?
I actually can't, Wendy, so I will depend on you to help me with that, please.
Okay, so our first comment was from Nantla. She says, one wonders, are we not putting our resources on mental health and not addressing, sorry, it just moved as I was talking. And not addressing the cause or contribution of mental health at work. Jonathan Mutige says, I think the key is engagement with our people as leaders. And I think the key engagement with our people as leaders, really engaged to understand where people are at. Expecting HR to do this is outsourcing the most important role of leaders. I couldn't agree more. I think this is a leadership role, and HR is there to support, but it's certainly not an HR role. I'm just going to, so there's lots of comments, Shirley. I'm just looking for some specific questions.
Maybe while you do that, Wendy, is Bongani able to speak now?
Hello, Shelley.
Hi, Bongani.
Can you?
Welcome, and thank you for putting your hand up here.
Thank you, Professor Zin. I have a comment more than a question. I think the important thing is that leaders have to play a major role in all of this.
Yeah.
And HR can never underestimate its responsibilities. HR plays also a major role in supporting leaders of an organization. We must remember that leaders in these challenging times, they themselves go through uncertainty and their own anxieties. Who is best to be there to support HR? Sorry, who's there to support leaders? So it's leaders who have to really lead. What I've found with organizations that I consult for is that leaders are more anxious than employees when it comes to the current situation that we find ourselves. And therefore, they need support. You will all know that executives always think these issues are HR issues to deal with. But what I have done in most cases is to work with leaders in helping them to understand and also develop empathy. To develop empathy on 3 levels. The first level is cognitive empathy. The second level is emotional empathy. And the third level is compassionate empathy. So in terms of cognitive empathy, I help leaders to understand the situations that employees who are going through mental health, who are going through anxieties, who are going through all sorts of other issues, what that means, how they need to try and understand what that is. Emotional empathy is also trying to walk in the shoes of the employee. And then thirdly, compassionate empathy is really to try to find a way to help and support employees. But as HR people, we are the ones who have to stick closely to our leaders and help them with their own anxieties, because those anxieties are reflected in the way that the organization behaves. Whether the organization is going to take these issues of wellness seriously or not, it is dependent on how the HR people are helping the leaders to deal with their own anxiety. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is incredibly profound, and there's a lot in what you just said there, Bongani. So thank you very much. I see that Tabu's hand is up. Maybe she wants to respond to that. Tabu?
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Bongani, as well for your comments. You know, what's quite striking even about the conversation that we're having right now is we are talking of leaders as sort of being external or immune to the issue of mental health. There's a study that was done by Oracle, and I think it's then another company called Wellness Intelligence. About 53% of the CEOs that were interviewed said that they had issues with their mental health. And I think if we are going to have an honest conversation around mental health and destigmatizing mental health in the workplace, leaders themselves need to make themselves vulnerable and be able to talk about their own challenges with mental health. They are not immune to mental health issues. And if you're going to encourage a culture, as I said, of openness, it really has to start with leaders. They set the tone from the top. They set the culture of the organization from the top. So you can do all these wonderful initiatives in the workplace, but you as a leader also need to ensure that you are really cultivating a culture of, vulnerability and honesty around mental health, and also institutionalize, embed, mental health as part of your organizational culture. Be an organization that does not just talks about it or responds haphazardly or whatever the situation might be. It needs to be very much instilled into the culture, and it starts from the top. We need more leaders to step up and be vulnerable and say they are having challenges. Research is showing us that CEOs have been struggling through this pandemic, but they are not coming forth and they're not showing that vulnerability. So in destigmatizing mental health issues in the workplace, leaders have to really, come to the fore. It's critical. That's the first thing I would say leaders actually need to do if they want to genuinely demonstrate that they're serious about mental health at work. They're not immune, and they need to start, speaking up as well.
That's a very critical point, Letabo. Thank you. It dovetails with what Bongani was trying to say earlier on about cognitive, emotional, and compassionate and empathy. I think there's a study by the Harvard Business Review that I picked up in, for those of you who do read this, it's the 8th of August 2020 version. It talks about leaders being vulnerable. Almost everyone at some level has had at some level of discomfort, but the universality of the experience will translate into a decrease in stigma only if people, especially people in power, share the experience, be honest about your mental health struggles, and a leader opens the door, as a leader, opens the door for employees to feel comfortable talking with you about their mental health issues of their own. So I think we need to model healthy behaviors. We've got to share that we are taking a walk, in the middle of the day. We have to share that we are building a culture of high connectivity through check-ins and intentionally checking in with direct reports. And that vulnerability that you talk about is so key if we're going to build trust and really fully engage our people on these issues. Otherwise, we'll just be, tinkering with the periphery of the issue. I'm very aware that the hour is running down, Wendy. So I'm going to ask of each of the panelists maybe just a 1 minute soundbite as you conclude this conversation. What is the key message that you want people to take away with them today? And I'm going to start with Terence. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shirley. Before I do that in a minute, if I can quickly talk to Vinay's question, and I'll just read the comment quickly. My view is that leadership is struggling with reconciling the entrepreneurial stroke business objective with the employee experience and wellness. Google, as an example, whilst focused heavily on wellness, made a decision to implement or is considering to implement salary cuts for remote work. HR has a huge role to play in being the thought leader, guide, and business conscious, helping business see the value. Terence and the panel can comment on this challenge. Vinay, absolutely spot on. It's interesting to see that the policy that we currently have on pay is potentially at odds with this notion of being more flexible and more caring. Because, for example, I've moved to Austin from Mountain View, and I took a pay cut to be able to do this. It was a personal decision that I made, but I would love to see, and I do believe Google leaders are very thoughtful about this, senior executive leaders are very thoughtful about this. I would love to see a reconsideration or at least a re-engagement on that policy. So that's what I will share there. And final closing thought, Shirley, let me come back to be caring. One of the things that I feel very blessed to have experienced at Google is this culture of caring. The fact that we as an organization leaned into this moment to tell people, make sure you take care of yourself first. And we also spent a lot of time thinking through the fact that leaders are going to be very important to the 150,000 Googlers, as we call our employees. And we made sure then to provide them with as much help as we can give them. But it's really important to lean into caring and making sure that your people feel and experience the organization as seeing them as human beings. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Terence. Thank you so much for that. Can I go to Karen?
Hi, thanks, Shirley. Absolutely. So I think, and just to reflect on the conversation so far, I think it's a huge amount of pressure that we're placing on leaders, and specifically at this time where we ourselves as leaders are transitioning into roles that we just can't, we're struggling to play. We're dealing with our own kind of well-being challenges as we navigate this uncertain hybrid workforce, and now we're having to lead others. And I think this is one instance where we do need to practice those skills of empathy and encouragement and building social ties, etc. But we can also look towards gaining some more analytics or look towards data to help inform those decisions. And speaking specifically from a point of view, a part of Life Online, we developed a well-being index, which is a really an assessment to understand where employees' well-being is currently sitting. And we measure across 3 different dimensions. That's motivation, psychological safety, and social contracts, which is the social ties that you've been speaking around, Terence. And it's phenomenal just with those results, that the types of decisions we can start shaping as leaders, getting that insight into where our people currently are at. For instance, we've recently just worked with a recruitment company over in Australia, and they've been really battling to try and drive these changes. And when you work with the leaders, when you work with the team, they are phenomenal. They are development oriented. They are achievement driven. They are just the perfect team, and the leaders are wonderful. They open door policy. They are there for their people, but they cannot get their people to move. And when we ran the diagnostic, what we found is their people are sitting on average at 32% resilience. Now, granted, their teams are mainly Melbourne and Sydney based. So if anybody knows Melbourne, I think our lockdown is, we are now the reigning world champions for a number of consecutive days in lockdown. So in terms of where people are at, they're just tired. Their resilience is so low. And without that insight, they would have kept pushing against that current. Now that we know that, this low resilience is the actual cause, we can now start tailoring and putting in place programs that aim to boost that resilience before the organization starts driving further with changes. Whereas before, they were questioning things like, are people developmentally oriented? Are they goal oriented? They were going in a completely wrong direction and spending, funds on stuff in the wrong way, trying to solve where their people were at. When it actually just comes down to, if we can just boost their resilience right now, we'll start breaking through that organizational inertia that they're experiencing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. That's very profound, and I have huge empathy for you, having seen some of the write-ups out of Australia on the lockdowns. So thank you so much for bringing that insight. Melisha, final word.
Thank you, Shirley. I feel like we need more time, so I'm not going to rehash what my esteemed panelists have shared. I would like to leave with a quote, if I may. And that quote would be, and it's for us as leaders, that your vulnerability is your greatest strength. Live wholeheartedly, live authentically, be brave, and let your vulnerability inspire you. And I think the most important thing as one leader to others, we're in this together. We need to be sharing knowledge more. We need to be sharing our ideas more, because therein is where we will find a way forward in this. Thank you, Shirley.
Oh, that's wonderful. Vulnerability is your greatest strength at this time. Thank you so much for that profound insight, Melisha. Letabo, over to you. Letabo, we have to unmute.
You're on mute.
I was just saying the importance of leading with compassion, not just compassion towards our employees. I think also as leaders, we need to be compassionate also with ourselves. I think quite a few people have highlighted that this is a tremendous responsibility on leaders. But I think also, being compassionate with yourself as a leader, recognizing also where you need help and seek out that help, because the more you also again be vulnerable, it's going to permeate to others in the organization when you demonstrate that vulnerability. And yeah, I think from my side, that's it. And let's engage with our people, find out where we can improve as leaders, find out where we can improve the organization, because I always say prevention is better than cure, even where mental health issues are concerned. Let's take those preventative measures and improve our workplaces for our people.
Thank you so much, Lesabo. Absolutely, leading with compassion, and I think those are very, very wise parting comments. Just one last thing from me, for those of you who read some of these books, Tom Peters has written a book about extreme humanism at this time is what is going to be required. So it seems to be the theme emerging from all of us here. I think this is such a deep topic, Wendy. There's so much that we, so much to pack into this. But thank you very much for the opportunity to facilitate with these amazing and really deep thinking panelists. There's a lot of food for thought there, a lot of compelling initiatives that we can put into place, and deep gratitude to our panelists for the efforts here today, and for our attendees and participants for actively engaging. And we have to finish, so I'm going to pass back to Wendy, and a huge thank you to Tuesday Consulting for the opportunity to have this discussion.
Thank you, Shirley, and thank you. We stuck almost to the top of the hour, and thank you to everybody for attending, but especially our panelists and to Shirley. I think it was very insightful and informative. And what I'm picking up from the chat box is that we should do more of this. So we will continue to do more of it. Nicole, I've decided not to do the mentee.com. I just think we've run out of time. I wish you all a wonderful week ahead. Please do take care of yourselves, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.